All right, so I guess we can get started. So thanks everyone for joining LivePeer Community Call. I'm Doug Buchanan, one of the founders of LivePeer. We host these calls once every 2 weeks, every other Thursday at 12 Eastern. And they're open for anyone who wants to join and participate, can kind of join the live call in the Google Hangout. But for those who just want to watch and follow along, we stream to crypto.livepeer.tv and we record and upload the calls later for many in the community who just want to watch after the fact. Each week we try and focus on, or each call we try and focus on kind of a different topic that's relevant to the LivePeer community, to people running infrastructure, operating on the network, building on the network, or participating in the network as token holders and stakers. Or we focus on kind of the video side of LivePeer and talk about things we've built and features and product stuff related to what people building video applications can use and build on top of LivePeer. And for this week, I think we have an exciting agenda topic. I'll kick it over to one of our community leads, Nelson, who's been coordinating this to kind of kick us off from here. Take it away, Nelson.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for joining. So this week we've got a few guests on, and the topic we're going to be discussing is building on top of open source protocols. So yeah, it's going to be a fairly open discussion. So anyone that would like to sort of join in, feel free. But to get started, I think it might be helpful to go through some of the guests we have on the call, just to briefly introduce themselves. So first, Adam, would you mind introducing yourself? I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, my name is Adam Sofer, and I'm a developer with LivePeer, focusing on the token holder experience. And right now I'm focusing on building a new and shiny staking app for token holders to stake their LivePeer token. So naturally, I'm using a lot of open source Web3 protocols to make that happen. But before I started working at LivePeer, I was actually a community member and contributed to things like the subgraph, the LivePeer subgraph, which is an indexing server, basically. And that's basically my background, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. And next, Matthew, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Hey guys, I am Matthew from Loopring protocol, which is a DEX protocol built on Ethereum. I just met Nelson a couple days ago in Berlin, and we were chatting. I'm relatively naive about LivePeer. I used to read up about it. I found some of your token economics and little mechanisms very interesting, but otherwise quite a noob. But he thought this could be interesting given that Loopring is an open source kind of middleware layer for exchanges on Ethereum. So hopefully I could take something away from this or add a little bit of value.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you. I think you will be able to. All right, and then next, so do we have, so Stefan, are you on the call? Sorry, I'm not sure if you're there.
Hey, yeah, I'm here. Sorry,
hey.
no video on my side.
Okay, cool. Would you mind just giving a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Stefan. I'm protocol architect at Numerai. I've been focused on building the Aresia platform for the last better part of the year, and we just launched recently, so it's quite exciting.
Okay, very cool. I'd love to expand on that a little bit later. And all right, and so lastly, Mike from Pocket Network, would you mind giving a quick introduction about yourself and Pocket?
Hey guys, Michael O'Rourke from Pocket Network, co-founder of Pocket. Pocket is a protocol meant to incentivize people to run full nodes. We're backing into this conversation, interestingly enough, from having first designed it on Ethereum and ending up building out our own protocol, actually independent blockchain. So we've got some interesting insights, I think, on building on blockchains. So that's a quick intro on my side.
Okay, awesome. So thanks, everyone. So I think all the different teams we've got on the call are sort of working in different sort of areas of the stack. But I think that's where it's quite interesting, sort of looking at, the different ways of bringing sort of developers into your sort of respective communities, and for some of you, building on top of your infrastructure. So I guess, like, to get started, the first question I wanted to sort of run through was to get a bit of an understanding of basically some of the biggest challenges that each of your projects have had building in crypto in general, and then in addition to that, sort of bringing other developers into your sort of ecosystem. So I guess to get started, perhaps Matthew, would you be able to take that one? I guess for you it's probably more applications and more integrating with other projects.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very interesting question for us, and we've actually kind of had slight revelations recently. So we've been around 2 years. We're a DEX protocol on top of Ethereum. We don't operate any products. We need people to build them on top of us. For the biggest shortcut to understanding would be like 0x relayers. That's the type of stuff that people could build on us. We're just, so a bit of context, we're very focused on just order book based high performance exchanges. So not Uniswap or Kyber or even like open order book relays like Radar Relay. We kind of allow people to build or like approximate a Binance feeling, but completely non-custodial. And we do that by using ZK rollups, like ZK snarks for scalability. So it's really high performance, non-custodial order book exchanges. Just my biggest takeaway and something interesting is, we built stuff that worked and no developers necessarily came. I lead the business development side of things, so I felt like an especially big failure. Here I had all the great engineers on my team. We're mostly based in China. We built a really good infrastructure, really great open source tools, and nobody really cared. Quite disappointing. We had half a dozen, even a dozen teams building on us, but they kind of were like hobbyist projects. Nobody really. It was because we made it quite trivial for people to just like fork one of our reference implementations. They could reskin it and operate it as they see fit. But yeah, no super compelling things came out. 3 or 4 projects came out of it. Recently, we just launched version 3, and our new insight or our direction is we're much more concerned with high quality projects building on us versus more of the hobbyist just forking us. And again, just to liken it to 0x, they had lots of relayers and lots of action, but if you actually look at the volume, like there's 1 or 2, really 1, that actually gets volume. So like the long tail of developers on there, it's even though they had them, maybe it's not as interesting. So our focus right now is to kind of really support about 5 or 6 regional partners who have really good operating, and this is kind of maybe counter to the purely open source ethos, but we're really trying to support 5 or 6 very strong technical and operational partners to spin up their non-custodial exchanges in their region. So we have the US, we have China, we have Hong Kong, we have Europe. So that has been, and it kind of feels good to me because it's more manageable. Everything is still open source. It's currently being audited right now, the new Snark version. But the biggest takeaway for me is that like we kind of went from really wide focus in terms of the scope and actually just developer outreach to now much more focused. And I kind of feel good about that. I'm not sure if anybody else has had a similar experience, but that's it. And sorry for being long-winded there.
Yeah, I just want to second what you said there about building some cool stuff and putting it out there. and being like, what the hell, why isn't anyone using this? So I totally echo what kind of that experience of releasing it and kind of iterating and finding out who kind of your true market or use case is, right? And kind of refining how you reach out to that. But to the question as well, kind of like our biggest challenges, one of our biggest challenges has been, I think, towing the line between, radical decentralization and practicality of using some protocol and expecting, we've got these massive visions that working at massive scale. How do you toe that line when you've got incredibly brilliant people who ask you questions and are like, what about this being, a central point of failure? And you're like, yeah, I know, but we want people to use the thing too, and kind of at least test our assumptions. And I think there's a really important line there of, we've got these things that we want people to use, and we need to have some set of a feedback mechanism, right? So designing your product or protocol or whatever it is around getting some early feedback and being able to iterate while, phasing out, those central points of failure. I think it's a big challenge that every single one of us probably has to deal with. So.
Okay, awesome. And I see that Julian's just joined us. So Julian, we've just done some introductions. Would you mind introducing yourself and what state capital is working on?
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm sorry if it's a bit noisy. I'm actually in the train. Yeah, so I'm Julian from State Capital. So we've been working on DTalk. So DTalk is a live streaming pay-per-view platform on LivePeer, and so we did a few different use cases on using DTalk, and now we doing a migration of DTalk to version 2. We'll be using the latest code from Connect v2. So we also being so then people will be able to make payment and using a hub to different wallet integrations. One of the really cool thing about DTalk is like people can actually watch stream without having access to a wallet or even crypto. So they can actually use they can QR code and then immediately jump into a live streaming for a specific market. So we also been integrating. The goal of DTalk is to be a platform, so then people can onboard on DTalk and then build different applications. One of the 3 applications that we'll be building is prediction market, a poll. Sorry, it's a bit noisy, guys. A poll and prediction market, a poll, and then being able to ask questions on the live stream. So DTalk is open source. We've been building it over the first iteration of DTalk was in Cape Town. That was the winner of the hack. And since then, we've been upgrading the code to adapt a few different tools. It's also like using ENS, Radon Network. The latest version will be using Connect v2, and obviously a LivePeer. So we're really looking forward for the new version for the StreamFlow on LivePeer. And we also applied for grants on applied for the LivePeer grant application on GitHub as well.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay,
thanks,
awesome.
Julian. Julian's one of the bold souls who's building on the very early alpha versions of LivePeer and other Web3 protocols. Like one of the learnings on our side, going back to your question, Nelson, about getting people to build on the kind of base layer protocols that you put out there. What we saw is that people build and follow the opportunities where there's incentives baked in, and in LivePeer, we kind of have 2 sides. We have this kind of protocol-focused supply side of infrastructure operators, token holders who power the network. And even though that will iterate, what's out there is a sort of complete product with incentives baked in, right? And there's been a lot of success of people building products on top of those protocols, things like the subgraph that Adam had built. It's got that pool for analytics, staking applications, etc. But then on the other side, the video side, where things are very early and it's in an alpha state, you are kind of pushing uphill, trying to spend energy getting developers to build on top of that before it's ready to fulfill a potential that really solves an enormous problem for them. So a lot of that has been kind of internal work that we've had to do to kind of try and hit those milestones and get to the releases that will solve, real problems, make real impact for developers.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. And I might even pass to you, Adam. So I guess you've had a different experience being sort of more of a developer building
Right.
on open protocols. What's been your experience, or what have been the challenges of sort of getting
Yeah.
started?
So it's actually been quite liberating building in the realm of Web3. So like I was thinking about it yesterday. I haven't had to really manage any databases. Like everything is serverless, and a lot of these tools are starting to mature. So it's kind of just like I get to like pick the best ones off the shelf. So for example, like choosing a Web3 provider for the staking app, like MetaMask was always the go-to, but now there's some other really interesting Web3 providers, such as there's one called Portis, for example, which I'm looking into, which doesn't require you to download a browser extension, which is great if you're trying to get new people to stake for the first time and you're trying to get rid of some of that friction in the user experience. It even lets you, if you want, subsidize gas fees. Leveraging the subgraph that I had already built to provide more of a Web 2.0 feel. So it's a Web 3 app, but it still feels fast. And for identity, we're going to be leveraging 3box, which is users and coming from Web 2 are used to filling out a profile, an avatar, a name, and that's something that is another thing that I can just pick off the shelf, and I don't have to manage any like database or anything like that. It's very freeing in that it allows me to focus on the user interface engineering, which is like really just building the app. So in that sense, it's been very liberating. There are still challenges, obviously, but I think they lie more so in the user experience, like designing the user experience and making the app feel familiar to users. And then, of course, like there is still confirmation times you have to account for on the blockchain. So, like that's another like UX challenge. Like, how do you provide feedback to a user and let them know that like a transaction is confirming and it'll take a couple minutes, stuff like that. But in terms of tooling, it's been, I'd say quite liberating.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I guess like on the topic of tooling, do you feel like there's any tooling today that is just like missing or that would make your life a lot easier?
I think, it's a good question. I still haven't experimented with, like I mentioned, Portis can potentially let us subsidize gas fees. I haven't really experimented with that. I know there's another tool that was just released called like the gas network or something like that, which I think could potentially help reduce a lot of friction in the Web3 experience. But I think it's still I don't know if it's production ready yet. So like I think like just the gas in general and the UX, the friction that gas causes, I think is still something to be solved. Yeah, but I do think on the wallet side of things, I think that's getting a lot better. That's improving. Things like I said, Portis, and there's a bunch of wallets out there now.
Okay, awesome. And Stefan, I know that you guys over at Numerai are working on Aresia, which just got announced, I think, yesterday. So would you mind like giving a bit of an overview of what you guys are trying to achieve there, and how you think it might sort of help some of these, I guess, like Web2 teams get more involved in the Web3 space?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Thanks for asking about it. So at Numa, we've been building this competition for the last 3 years that essentially allows us to crowdsource predictions from our community of data scientists and then trade on them in our hedge fund. And it's all been based around quite a simple idea, which is essentially that if people have money at stake on a prediction or just data, then it's much more likely to be good data. And for some reason, this is sort of a very simple idea that seems very obvious to people in the Web3 world, but hasn't made it into a bunch of different Web 2 applications. There's a lot of focus on developing these complex incentive compatible protocols, but there's really an idea that works just between two people that can be used everywhere. And so that's what Aresia is about. It's about bringing essentially the lessons that we've learned building this tournament and extending it to be applicable to a variety of different use cases. We launched a couple of them. One of them is called Aresia Quant, which is a similar platform to what we built before, and a second one called Aresia Bay, which is a marketplace for data of any kind.
Okay, great.
Have people been building products on top of the Numerai and Erasure protocols to allow your kind of prediction market or tournament participants, to kind of participate in the process in an easier way, or to manage their rewards, or whatever the kind of use cases around that?
Yeah, well, the protocol just got launched yesterday, so not quite yet. But we do have a grants program that we've been sort of working on for the last few months. We're giving away $1 million to various different teams who are building on top of it, and we have a couple of really exciting projects coming down the pipeline with that.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, and yeah, okay. So to move on to the next question, so I guess to talk a little bit about, continuing on this theme of like making it easier for developers to build on top of this infrastructure. I guess one of the topics that it sort of comes up naturally is that we've seen a lot of success in, say, like the 0x and Augur communities, which have had a lot of developers sort of building on top of their infrastructure. So what other sort of like resources can we feel teams can provide to make it easier for developers to sort of get started building in these ecosystems? So I guess like an obvious one that comes to mind is SDKs. But is there anything else that you guys are working on, or that you've seen other communities implement successfully?
Well, in terms of like pure tooling and things that, I mean, it's different for every, I think, project or protocol, but because we're kind of building a protocol, there's kind of three legs, I suppose. First off, shouts to Tendermint and Cosmos for building out an amazing SDK and Tendermint below that, because that made it really easy for us to connect our application to a finality layer, right? With that. The other piece, I think, is governance, which we're starting to see. And well, back to the protocol side, Tendermint, and we're starting to see with Polkadot and Substrate, kind of these like initial building blocks for people who are building these application-specific chains like us are critical. And you've got governance, right? We've seen an explosion probably in the last year of governance tooling and products with Aragon, Moloch, how that's forked off, created a bunch of forks. We're starting to see a little bit more sophistication and experimentation on that. And I think this is probably somewhere where the LivePeer crew can probably empathize with, but economic modeling, I think, is something that's sorely lacking. Just to be able to something easily to be able to test your assumptions, something more off the shelf, right? These kinds of things are sorely lacking, and I hope that with the work that we've put into it, that we can, next year probably release some tooling and things along those lines that at least reflect our experience in modeling out these problems. So I'd say in tooling right now, we are sorely lacking in just general economic modeling and simulations and things like that.
Yeah, beyond just modeling and simulations, just testing in general, like it takes a long time to deploy a protocol upgrade with confidence because the amount of testing required, and auditing required is so significant. So any tools that assist in that process would create a big win.
Okay, awesome, guys. Unless anyone had anything else to add to that. So yeah, the other question I wanted to run through was when building on top of other protocols, for those of you that are, or for building infrastructure that other people will build on, what are some of the risks that teams face building on top of other people's infrastructure? And is there anything that you guys have done to help mitigate these risks for yourselves, or for other projects that we'll be building on top of your infrastructure to make it attractive for them to get started?
I can tackle this one. So since we've been building on Ethereum since early 2017, there was very little sort of certainty as to what the future of the platform was going to be. I mean, back then, Solidity was such a clusterfuck. We didn't even know what the next release was going to look like. And so now things have stabilized a little bit, but I think it's built us a sort of mindset that we need to be flexible enough to adapt to any sort of part of the ecosystem going down, and having to move our infrastructure over to a different one. And that's sort of the robustness that we've been looking to provide as part of our system as well, which is that as much as possible, it's transferable and interoperable with any other system.
Yeah, Julian, when you think about DTOC, you are building on like 4 or 5 different newly released, evolving protocols. Has it been just fun because it's early, or a huge challenge to pull everything together, get it to work, and keep up with the changes coming down the pipe on all of them?
If you guys can hear me, because so the train is moving very fast. But yeah, so it's kind of challenging actually to keep track of all the changes. So what we do, we work in sprint planning, and we only allocate 50% of our time to keep up with the changes. So it allows us to not always build on the latest changes of a specific project. For example, in Connect v2, and then we wait for all the all the bugs that should be fixed, and then we implement. But we should be ready for the version 2 of DTOC in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's actually very challenging. Otherwise, you feel yourself. You always handle like kind of wasting time trying to catch up with all the projects if you're trying to implement them. I think it's better to wait a little bit when they are much more stable.
I have a question related to this. For the people building on top of, well, I guess everyone's building on top of kind of shifting ground to some extent, as Stefan said, but maybe this is actually more for Julian or more kind of higher up the stack product level stuff. Is there like a preference to, or in what cases would you need to know a team and speak to the team like beforehand versus maybe a preference for, just building it yourself and having like the documentation being pretty good and not needing to reach out to them, or like some things are like so critical that like you want to meet the team, know the team, kind of know what they're thinking 6 months down the line? Like, what's the thought process on that?
Yeah, I think regarding us, like all the projects that we've been building in Stake Capital, especially DTOC, I think it's really one of our main requirements is to interact directly with the team. So we usually create a private channel, and then we send all the questions we have, and we also meet with the team and ask about the future of the project, trying to understand where they're moving to. That's something that happened with Connex and also with LiveP when we ask questions on Discord or whatsoever. So we actually try to understand how we could easily adapt our project if the implementation that we're trying to build has a massive impact on other different projects, or other project has a massive impact on the project we're trying to build. So I think for us it's very about meeting the team and trying to understand if it's a solid project and if it makes.
Yeah, same here. Like, typically, I'll like just play around with like a tool that I'm interested in, and like naturally I'll have questions, and I'll join the team's Discord or wherever they are, and ask questions, and then just get to know them over the course of my experimentation with whatever tool it is. So like that process that's basically how I went about like building the subgraph and getting to know the graph team, and then also with 3box, we have a close relationship with those folks as well. So yeah, naturally we just get to know these teams throughout the course of building with their tools, and it definitely helps because you always have questions because the technology is so new.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. And I guess sort of related to that question, for those of you that are building protocols, how do you think about building a sort of, I guess, a support function for the protocol going, into the future? So I guess that's like one of the benefits of dealing with like a centralized company is that often they have entire teams that can sort of hold your hand through these kind of processes, if you're developing or if you're building an application on top. So in the goal of like reaching like full decentralization, how do you think about what a support function should look like and ensuring that people in your ecosystem feel like they have support they can kind of go to?
Well, I think just because a protocol is decentralized and open source doesn't mean that there can't be entities that play the important and necessary roles to drive adoption, like support, for example, or creating a great developer experience, right? In any of these mature ecosystems, you see those entities forming, providing, really, really valuable services to the community, right? Like what would Ethereum be without like MetaMask or MyCrypto doing so much user support, teaching users how to use this, and then all the developer focused groups like Truffle and whatnot who have done so much developer support of people building on the ecosystem. And so I think it kind of goes back to like the if you build it, will they come question, and the answer is like no, they won't just come because it's because there's a great experience around it. There's the right support infrastructure, the right community there in place to kind of help people not just like observe the potential, but actually fulfill and realize the potential of these projects.
Yeah, and I think just to clearly define, just add on to that, to clearly define where those channels are. And if you are a token holder looking for price talk, okay, go to this channel. If you are a developer looking for support, go to this channel, right? And each for one of your personas, right? For the people of your product, having clear roads for them to follow, I think is really critical.
I have a question. So outside of layer one protocols like Ethereum and Cosmos and whatnot, what projects have we seen with great developer communities building a lot on top of them that we really admire? And what specifically can we observe that they've done really well that many of us may be able to learn from to improve our own developer communities?
I'll go from personal experience. I've got a bit of experience with Tezos ecosystem. And frankly, they have a very different developer community than you would see on Ethereum. And a lot of it has been grassroots, starting from Paris and kind of grown organically from there. So I think it's really interesting to me, me being I live in Tampa, Florida, and half our team is here in Tampa and Dominican Republic. So for us focusing on really local communities here in Florida and in the Caribbean, following Tezos and seeing how they've grown that completely independent organic community, it's actually quite interesting to me. And I think that's a model that we're keen to follow, to be honest.
So no replacement for boots on the ground and the grassroots work of just branching out locally from the strong starting point.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's no magic bullet, right? So
Yeah, a bunch of people have mentioned 0x, right? Like what have people observed that they've done really positively that's encouraged a lot of people to develop? I think some of that also was kind of grassroots hand-to-hand combat, right? Where they were engaging directly with potential developers and companies and partners and helping them get started, right? Has anyone observed or have experience with how 0x has gone about it?
I can't say I've used their API or their developer tools, but I've just observed and I've looked at their documentation and I've seen it evolve, and I've definitely admired it from afar. And like from the very beginning of that project, I noticed they had a lot of participants, a lot of decentralized exchanges building on their tooling. So it seems like they're doing something right. And I even noticed more recently, like they're improving the like the liquidity of the network just through their recent updates to their SDK. So yeah, just from like a documentation standpoint, I really admire what 0x is doing actually.
Yeah, I agree with what Adam is saying here from having used 0x protocol at ETH Paris. Their documentation was really, really clear. So that made it very easy for us to build something on top of it in like a day or two. So yeah.
Yeah, my experience with 0x, like you guys, you said actually built on, but I see them implementing not only the absolute smart and those different projects that were able to exchange with smart tokens and provide liquidity without adding the tokens. The 0x protocol kind of died to me. And that's why I mean, it's kind of very difficult. It's very easy to build on, but it's very difficult to have a mass of people using it right now.
I couldn't really hear Julian. A related question, given that Loopring is a decentralized exchange protocol. It's funny, we definitely admire and respect and that team and have learned from them. Our documentation could definitely be a lot better. We are based. A lot of it was like language barrier, given that we're based in China, although that's not necessarily an excuse. But now, as I said, we have really focused on, instead of being able to just be built upon super trivially, we kind of view it as Loopring wanting to be the solution for very serious DEX operators. And my question is and just specifically, just for context, is there's a new kind of role in our architecture for the snarks stuff for scalability. There's like the prover, the proof generator, which is like a necessary component. So like a DEX has all these transactions, they send it to the prover, like a batch of 5,000 updates to their Merkle tree basically, and we prove it and submit it to Ethereum for them. That new role is, as opposed to our 2-year history, which has been all open source, this is like the potential for a for-profit business, a spin out that if a DEX wants to build on Loopring, it's very easy. But if they don't want to become like a zero knowledge expert, they could use us as the operator, this prover function, or they could do it themselves and spin up a bunch of machines and do the proof themselves. Does anybody have, so we're working through this now and it's exciting and new because it's this, as I said, it's kind of like a legacy business, not just open source protocol. It's like a little ancillary service that DEXs would need. So we have like, these service level agreements and just normal legacy business considerations. Has anybody here worked with something like that in this space where everything's open source, but then there's also a kind of commercial agreement and they help you in some other way. I guess like one analog in the past is like where there's consulting in other industries, like you're using something open source, but you use consulting services from a company, or in this case, as I said, like the snark prover. Does anybody have experience kind of, so one leg in open source and the other leg in like a normal commercial agreement for profit?
Ledger and Trezor have open source hardware. Well, Ledger has an open source hardware design. I'm sorry, Trezor has open source hardware design, and both Ledger and Trezor have open source software. And they might be an example of what you're talking about.
It's a good point.
Yeah, I'm not trying to dominate the call with LivePeer specific information, but the obvious one right in front of us on the LivePeer community call is that like LivePeer Incorporated, the company, does play the role, the business role of working with video companies and industries that want to leverage the LivePeer network, right? And in the process of playing that role, there's products and services that they may require or request or need that are not native to the protocol, right? They are value add kind of for-profit services that we'll be developing in the service of serving customers that drives adoption onto the network. So I don't think that is abnormal. I don't think it's something that you have to be concerned about in the great philosophical decentralization prioritization debate. I think you're offering the services that allow people to use your network and drive adoption onto the protocol, and those services may exist better with traditional business models in some cases than decentralized business models. What's key though is that like you have an open marketplace and open source software where anyone could choose to play that role themselves or could compete to play that role in a more efficient, cost-effective way than you are. And so you're not a gatekeeper or a toll taker, but you're on equal playing field along with everyone else, and that's what would enable people to opt into using your network.
Right. Yeah, that last point, exactly right. We will allow people. We kind of hope that we'll be outcompeted by these provers. That's interesting. You say that, Doug. I'm curious. Is that just, or maybe you don't want to answer this, or I guess it's out there, but you have two separate entities. Like, so you have the protocol provider and then the corp for these services, or do you split those up, or like not necessarily?
We've always just been LivePeer Inc. Just for simplification purposes. We certainly did the full exploration of, do you have a foundation, and do you have a company, and do you have, entities in different locations around the world? But in the end, all the software is open source. The protocol is open source. There doesn't necessarily need to be it's a longer discussion of the benefits that an entity that's associated only with the open source would provide versus not provide. But today we've kept it simple, and the company just develops the open and maintains the open source software and protocol.
Cool.
Okay, awesome. And this might be a question for you, Doug, or anyone else on the call that's sort of interfacing with perhaps people in the traditional like Web 2 space or outside of crypto. When building like developer documentation, are you sort of thinking, I guess like if you're dealing with a developer outside of crypto, you're almost needing to bring them up to speed on your project and then also bring them up to speed on crypto in general. So how do you think about that? Do you feel it's your role to include Crypto 101 in your documentation and support, or do you think by the time they get to you, they should have already sort of got themselves up to speed on that?
In the LivePeer world, on the video side, the core kind of value proposition that LivePeer can promise, we don't want to have to get people up to speed on crypto. We don't want them to have to even understand crypto, right? They're looking to use video infrastructure, and it's our job to make it as simple as possible for them to do that. On the protocol side and the infrastructure supply side, I think people do need to have a deep familiarity with crypto, and if it's not our job to educate them, we can at least point them to the right resources. But there you do need to include more of that in your documentation because it is native to the core operations of the protocol and network.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. That's really helpful. All right, guys. So look, that's all the questions I had to run through. Unless did anyone else have any other random questions or points they'd like to discuss? Okay, awesome. All right. Well, look, thanks everyone for joining, guys. It's been awesome to have this discussion. I certainly learned a lot, and yeah, no, it's been great to hear about all your projects, what you're working on, and how you're thinking about the developer side of the space.
And thanks to all the guests from other projects who joined. I appreciate it. That was great.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Nelson.
guys.
This is great
Yeah.
meeting you guys.
Happy to be here. Thanks,
All
guys. Nice
right, so
meeting you all.
we'll stop recording. We'll have this
everyone.
online.
See you guys.
Hey.
Bye-bye.